to give them healthier and better lives. There are some things that I have learned to do better in life than others. And after 15 years of executive experience, I have learned how to be an effective leader. Whether it was raising the minimum wage, making our public schools the best in America, passing marriage equality, the DREAM Act, and comprehensive gun safety legislation, I have learned how to get things done because I am very clear about my principles. Thanks to President Obama, our country has come a long way since the Wall Street crash of 2008. Our country's doing better. We are creating jobs again. But we elected a president, not a magician. And there is urgent work that needs to be done right now. For there is a deep injustice, an economic injustice that threatens to tear our country apart, and it will not solve itself. Injustice does not solve itself. What I'm talking about is this. Our middle class is shrinking. Our poorer families are becoming poorer. And 70% of us are earning the same or less than we were 12 years ago. We need new leadership, and we need action. The sort of action that will actually make wages go up again for all American families. Our economy isn't money, it's people. It's all of our people. And so we must invest in our country and the potential of our kids to make college a debt-free option for all families instead of saddling our kids with a lifetime of crushing debt. And we must square our shoulders to the great challenge of climate change and make this threat our opportunity. The future is what we make of it. We are all in this together. And the question in this election is whether you and I still have the ability to give our kids a better future. I believe we do. That is why I am running for president, and I need your help. Thank you.
Concern of voters about you is that you tout your record as Baltimore's mayor. As we all know, we all saw it, that city exploded in riots and violence in April. The current top prosecutor in Baltimore, also a Democrat, blames your zero-tolerance policies for sowing the seeds of unrest. Why should Americans trust you with the country when they see what's going on in the city that you ran for more than 7 years?
Yeah, actually, I believe what she said was that there's a lot of policies that have led to this unrest. But Anderson, when I ran for mayor of Baltimore in 1999...
She actually, just for the record, when she was asked which policies to name two, she said zero tolerance. I mean, there's a number of old policies that we were seeing the result of, that distrust of communities where communities don't want to step forward and say who killed a 3-year-old. It's a direct result of these failed policies.
Let's talk about this a little bit. One of the things that was not reported during that heartbreaking night of unrest in Baltimore was that arrests had actually fallen to a 38-year low in the year prior to Freddie Gray's tragic death. Anderson, when I ran for mayor of Baltimore back in 1999, it was not because our city was doing well. It was because we had allowed ourselves to become the most violent, addicted, and abandoned city in America. And I ran and promised people that together we could turn that around. And we put our city on a path to reduce violent crime, or Part 1 crime, by more than any major city in America over the next 10 years. I did not make our city immune to setbacks, but I attended a lot of funerals, including one for a family of 7 who were firebombed in their sleep for picking up the phone in a poor African-American neighborhood and calling the police because of drug dealers on their corner. We've saved over 1,000 lives in Baltimore in the last 15 years of people working together, and the vast majority of them were young and poor and black. It wasn't easy on any day, but we saved lives and we gave our city a better future, improving police and community relations every single day that I was in office.
In 1 year alone, though, 100,000 arrests were made in your city, a city of 640,000 people. The ACLU, the NAACP sued you, sued the city, and the city actually settled, saying a lot of those arrests were without probable cause.
Well, I think the key word in your follow-up there was the word settled. That's true, that was settled. Arrests peaked in 2003, Anderson, but they declined every year after that as we restored peace in our poorer neighborhoods so that people could actually walk and not have to worry about their kids or their loved ones being victims of violent crime. Look, none of this is easy. None of us has all the answers. But together as a city, we saved a lot of lives. It was about leadership, it was about principle, and it was about bringing people together. Thank you.
Senator Webb, you had a Democratic-controlled legislature. President Obama couldn't convince Congress to pass gun legislation after the massacres in Aurora, in Newtown, and Charleston. How can you?
And Anderson, I also had to overcome a lot of opposition in the leadership of my own party to get this done. Look, it's fine to talk about all of these things, and I'm glad we're talking about these things, but I've actually done them. We passed comprehensive gun safety legislation, not by looking at the pollings or looking at what the polls said. We actually did it. And Anderson, here tonight in our audience are two people that make this issue very, very real. Sandy and Lonnie Phillips are here from Colorado. And their daughter, Jessie, was one of those who lost their lives in that awful mass shooting in Aurora. Now, to try to transform their grief, they went to court, where sometimes progress does happen when you file in court. But in this case, you want to talk about a rigged game, Senator? The game was rigged. A man had sold 4,000 rounds of military ammunition to this person that killed their daughter, riddled her body with 5 bullets, and he didn't even ask where it was going. And not only did their case get thrown out of court, they were slapped with $200,000 in court fees because of the way that the NRA gets its way in our Congress, and we take a back seat. It's time to stand up and pass comprehensive gun safety legislation as a nation.
Senator Sanders, I want you.
Excuse me, Senator, it was not about rural. Senator, it was not about rural and urban.
Exactly about
Have you ever been to the Eastern Shore? Have you ever been to Western Maryland? We were able to pass this and still respect the hunting traditions of people who live in our rural areas. And we did it, Anderson, by leading with principle, not by pandering to the NRA and backing down to the NRA.
Voting record,
And I have an F for
I don't
the
think I am
NRA.
pandering, but you have not been in the United States Congress.
The NRA wrote to the members in our state and told people with hunting traditions lies about what our comprehensive gun safety legislation is. I wrote right back to them and laid out what it actually did. And that's why not only did we pass it, but the NRA didn't dare to petition it to referendum because we built a public consensus.
I want to move on to another issue which is in the headlines right now, another crisis-making headline. Governor O'Malley, Secretary Clinton voted to authorize military force in Iraq, supported more troops in Afghanistan. As Secretary of State, she wanted to arm Syrian rebels and push for the bombing of Libya. Is she too quick to use military force?
Anderson, no president, no commander-in-chief should take the military option off the table, even if most of us would agree that it should be the last option. What disturbed people so much about, and I would agree with Senator Sanders on this, leading us into Iraq under false pretenses and telling us as a people that there were weapons of mass destruction there was one of the worst blunders in modern American history. But the reason why people remain angry about it is because people feel like a lot of our legislators got railroaded in a war fever and by polls. And I remember being at a dinner shortly before that invasion. People were talking and saying, well, it'll take us just a couple years to rebuild democracy. And I thought, has this world gone mad? Whenever we go, in contrary to John Quincy Adams' advice, searching the world for monsters to destroy, and when we use political might to take at the expense of democratic principle, we hurt ourselves and we hurt our kids.
Does she want to use military force too rapidly?
I believe that as president, I would not be so quick to pull for a military tool. I believe that a no-fly zone in Syria at this time, actually, Secretary, would be a mistake. You have to enforce no-fly zones. And I believe, especially with the Russian Air Force in the air, it could lead to an escalation because of an accident that we would deeply regret. I support President Obama. I think we have to play a long game, and I think ultimately, you want to talk about blunders, I think Assad's invasion of Syria will be seen as a blunder.
Governor O'Malley, just...
Anderson, I think we are learning... Anderson, I think there's lessons to be learned from Benghazi. And those lessons are that we need to do a much better job as a nation of having human intelligence on the ground so that we know who the emerging next generation leaders are that are coming up to replace a dictator when his time on this planet ends. And I believe that's what Chris Stevens was trying to do. But he did not have the tools. We have failed as a country to invest in the human intelligence that would allow us to make not only better decisions in Libya, but better decisions in Syria today. And it's a huge national security failing.
Senator Webb, I want you to be able to...
That remains the biggest threat, along with the spread of ISIL. Climate change, of course, makes cascading threats even worse.
Secretary Clinton, the greatest national security threat.
I think it has to be continuing threat from the spread.
Governor O'Malley, you expressed concern on the campaign trail that the Democratic Party is, and I quote, being defined by Hillary Clinton's email scandal. You heard her answer. Do you still feel that way tonight?
I believe that now that we're finally having debates, Anderson, that we don't have to be defined by the email scandal and how long, what the FBI is asking about. Instead, we can talk about affordable college, making college debt-free, and all the issues, which is why, and I see the chair of the DNC here, look how glad we are actually to be talking about the issues that matter most to people around their kitchen table. We need to get wages to go up, college more affordable.
Thank you, Governor.
We need to make America 100% clean electric by 2050.
I want to talk about issues of... Governor O'Malley, the question from Arthur was, do Black Lives Matter? Do all lives matter?
Yeah, and Anderson, the point that the Black Lives Matter movement is making is a very, very legitimate and serious point. And that is that as a nation, we have undervalued the lives of Black lives, people of color. When I ran for mayor of Baltimore, we were burying over 350 young men every single year, mostly young and poor and Black. And I said to our legislature at the time when I appeared in front of them as a mayor, that if we were burying white, young, poor men in these numbers, we would be marching in the streets and there would be a different reaction. Black Lives Matter, and we have a lot of work to do to reform our criminal justice system and to address race relations in our country.
Secretary Clinton, what would you do?
Anderson, I want to associate myself with many of the items that the senator from Vermont mentioned, and I actually did them in our state. We raised the minimum wage, passed the living wage, invested more in infrastructure, went 4 years in a row without a penny's increase for college tuition. But there's another piece that Senator Sanders left out tonight, but he's been excellent about underscoring that. And that is that we need to separate the casino, speculative, mega bank gambling that we have to ensure with our money from the commercial banking, namely reinstating Glass-Steagall. Secretary Clinton mentioned my support 8 years ago, and Secretary, I was proud to support you 8 years ago, but something happened in between, and that is, Anderson, a Wall Street crash that wiped out millions of jobs and millions of savings for families, and we are still just as vulnerable, Paul Volcker says today. We need to reinstate Glass-Steagall, and that's a huge difference on this stage among us as candidates.
I do just for viewers at home who may not be reading up on this, Glass-Steagall.
But this is the big banks. I mean, once we repealed Glass-Steagall back in the late 1999s, the big banks, the six of them, went from controlling with the equivalent of 15% of our GDP to now 65% of our GDP. And right before this debate, Secretary Clinton's campaign put out a lot of reversals on positions on Keystone and many other things. But one of them that we still have a great difference on, Madam Secretary, is that you are not for Glass-Steagall. You are not for putting a firewall between this speculative, risky shadow banking behavior. I am. And the people of our country need a president who's on their side, willing to protect the Main Street economy from recklessness on Wall Street. We have to fulfill our promise.
I have to let you respond.
We've heard up here some of the old thinking on immigration reform, and it's why it's gridlocked. We need to understand that our country's made stronger in every generation by the arrival of new American immigrants. That is why I have put out a policy for comprehensive immigration reform. That is why I would go further than President Obama has on DACA and DAPA. I mean, we are a nation of immigrants. We are made stronger by immigrants. Do you think for a second that simply because somebody's standing in a broken queue on naturalization, they're not going to go to the hospital? And that care isn't going to fall onto our insurance rates? I am for a generous, compassionate America that says we're all in this together. We need comprehensive immigration reform. It'll make wages go up in America. And a lot of the xenophobes, the immigrant haters, like some that we've heard, like Donald Trump, that carnival barker in the Republican Party, tried to mischaracterize it as free tuition for illegal immigrants. But we took our case to the people when it was petitioned to referendum, and we won with 58% of the vote. The more our children learn, the more they will earn, and that's true of children who have yet to be naturalized, but will become American.
Senator Sanders, you talked about your record on the Veterans Affairs. Snowden.
Anderson, Snowden put a lot of Americans' lives at risk. Snowden broke the law. Whistleblowers do not run to Russia and try to get protection from Putin. If he really believes that, he should be back here.
Senator Sanders, and then President Obama's administration.
I would follow through on the promise that the American people thought we made as Democratic Party. to protect the Main Street economy from recklessness on Wall Street. I would push to separate out these too big to jail, too big to fail banks and put in place Glass-Steagall, a modern Glass-Steagall that creates a firewall so that this wreckage of our economy can never happen again.
Secretary Clinton, how would you...
What we need is a green energy revolution. We need to move America to a 100% clean electric grid by 2050
And we want to
create 5 million jobs along the way.
And we're going to talk more about climate change and about Secretary Clinton, why she shouldn't get the crown.
Well, actually, you know, we had this conversation, and I will share with you that I've traveled all around the country, Anderson, and there's two phrases I keep hearing again and again and again, and they are the phrases new leadership and getting things done. We cannot be this dissatisfied with our gridlocked national politics and an economy where 70% of us are earning the same or less than we were 12 years ago, and think that a resort to old names is going to move us forward. I respect what Secretary Clinton and her husband have done for our country, but our country needs new leadership to move forward.
Secretary Clinton, you have to be able to respond.
O'Malley, this is from Anna Bettis from Tempe, Arizona. Here it is.
As a young person, I'm very concerned about climate change and how it will affect my future. As presidential candidate, what will you do to address climate change?
So, Governor O'Malley, please tell Anna how you would protect the environment better than all the other candidates up on that stage.
Yeah, Anna, I have put forward a plan, and I'm the only candidate, I believe, in either party to do this, to move America forward to a 100% clean electric grid by 2050. We did not land a man on the moon with an all-of-the-above strategy. It was an intentional engineering challenge, and we solved it as a nation. And our nation must solve this one. So I put forward the plan that would extend the investor tax credits for solar and for wind. If you go across Iowa, you see that 30% of their energy now comes from wind. We're here in Las Vegas, one of the most sustainable cities in America, doing important things in terms of green building, architecture, and design. We can get there as a nation, but it's going to require presidential leadership. And as president, I intend to sign as my very first order in office an order that moves us as a nation and dedicates our resources to solving this problem and moving us to a 100% clean electric grid by 2050. We can do it.
Governor O'Malley, thank you very much. Senator O'Malley?
Yeah, Anderson, in our state, we actually expanded family leave, and I have to agree with Secretary Clinton and Senator Sanders. Look, the genius of our nation is that we find ways in every generation to include more of our people more fully in the economic life of our country. And we need to do that for our families, and especially so that women aren't penalized and having to drop out of the workforce. My wife Katie's here with our 4 kids. And man, that was a juggle when we had little kids and keeping jobs and moving forward. We would be a stronger nation economically if we had paid family leave.
Governor, thank you.
The National Rifle Association.
Secretary Clinton, Governor O'Malley, you have 90 seconds.
Anderson, thank you. I am very, very grateful to have been able to be on this stage with this distinguished group of candidates tonight. And what you heard tonight, Anderson, was a very, very, and all of you watching at home, was a very, very different debate than from the sort of debate you heard from the 2 presidential Republican debates. On this stage, you didn't hear anyone denigrate women. You didn't hear anyone make racist comments about new American immigrants. You didn't hear anyone speak ill of another American because of their religious belief. What you heard instead on this stage tonight was an honest search for the answers that'll move our country forward, to move us to a 100% clean electric energy grid by 2050, to take the actions that we have always taken as Americans so that we can actually attack injustice in our country, employ more of our people, rebuild our cities and towns, educate our children at higher and better levels, and include more of our people in the economic, social, and political life of our country. I truly believe that we are standing on the threshold of a new era of American progress. Unless you become discouraged about our gridlock in Congress, talk to our young people under 30, because you'll never find among them people that want to bash immigrants or people that want to deny rights to gay couples. That tells me we are moving to a more connected, generous, and compassionate place. And we need to speak to the goodness within our country.
Thank you very much.